Supply chain was called procurement when I started, right? Procurement was more the organization which is buying. The procurement process was, hey, buy as cheap as you can. This has changed. It's not supply chain. It's much broader. Logistics in there, quality surveillance, all this. It really devolved from pure buying organization to real managing supply chain.
What happens when billions of dollars ride on the decisions of one team? In the world of EPCs, engineering, procurement, and construction companies, that's not hypothetical, it's Tuesday. Today, I'm sitting down with Carsten Bernstiel, Vice President of Procurement for Kiewit's Oil, Gas, and Chemical Group. With over 25 years managing supply chains for massive capital projects around the world, Carsten has a rare vantage point into how the EPC business is evolving, what makes suppliers truly valuable, and why the smallest component can make or break a multi-billion-dollar build. If you want to understand how big projects really get done and where the industry is heading, this conversation is for you. All right. Cool. Carsten, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Hello, Rakesh. Thank you. It's a great honor to be here. I look forward to this discussion with you.
Yeah. So I love to just start with the basics. What do you do? And where do you work?
So I work for Kiewit. Kiewit is a big EPC, a US-based company. We do business in the US, in Canada, and Mexico. We are more than 140 years old and founded by Peter Kiewit. Great company to work for. We are a private company and we do projects in all kinds of areas where you can build something. So we build infrastructure projects like bridges, highways. We build buildings, university buildings, for example. We build power plants. We build chemical plants, what I'm responsible for. And we build industrial projects like data center or food factories, something like that.
Okay.
So very diverse company.
The portion of Kiewit that you work in is called OGC.
That's correct.
Right, which is oil, gas, and chemicals.
Correct.
Right.
So we handle all these oil, gas, chemical projects. I'm responsible for the supply chain for these projects. We have a shared service in procurement. So we have some departments which are shared between all the different businesses, like expediting, inspection, or logistics. But where the rubber hits the road, so where we execute the jobs, the supply chain is embedded in the operation district and has a VP on top who is responsible for the supply chain strategy for these EPC projects.
So what is the day-to-day work in running the supply chain? What does that consist of?
So the first thing is, of course, resource management, right? So we have long-lasting projects. So you have estimates which are executed over months. And very often you only learn the day, I need 10 people to execute this estimate. The business is very digital, right? You get the job or not, right? And if you get the job, you have maybe not enough people. If you don't get the job, you have maybe too many people for not the work you don't have.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
This is one part, is the resource management.
Sure.
The other part is developing the supply chain strategy for the projects we have, which means we try to find the right partners. We analyze the supply chain of this job, the equipment we need to identify risks. So where could be a potential risk if we execute this job, and how would we mitigate this risk?
Got it.
We look into logistics. How do we transport all the equipment and every bits and piece that you mentioned before to the site? Because Kiewit is not producing anything. We are not manufacturing everything. 100% of the parts we build into these plants are sourced somewhere around the globe.
Yeah, and the material you purchase in the supply chain group comprises what percentage of the overall cost on a project?
It depends a little bit how big the job is, but it's somewhere in the range of 30 to 50% of the total installed cost. So a significant amount.
The highest cost or second highest cost after?
Construction usually, at least in the US, is the highest portion.
Yeah.
If you go to Middle East, because of the lower construction cost. The ratio of procurement is maybe higher, and it's maybe 30% construction and 50% procurement.
Yeah, but it's not an exaggeration to say the work you do in supply chain, it really determines, it's one of the determining factors to the profitability of a job, whether you make money or not.
Yeah, in particular because you're sitting in between the engineering, who defines what we need, and then this construction, who is finally our internal client, to provide them the material to build the facility as efficient as they can, and be fed with the material they need.
And that schedule in the plant is extremely detailed at the construction site. It's planned out to every last detail of what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's correct. So I think people who don't work in this business don't have an idea to which detail the planning goes, and how much even a small piece which is missing could affect the overall schedule or the productivity at the site.
Yeah. Do you have any examples? You can keep the people involved anonymous. But I'm curious of what kind of stories you have of a small component holding up a project, for example.
Yeah. So an example for a small piece could be a small valve. If you don't get the valves to be built into the piping, ISOs, there's nothing you can flow through, right? So there's just a missing piece. There's a hole in the pipe, and you cannot run any media through this. So piping is always on a critical path. Steel structure is always on a critical path. There could be minor parts which kind of stop the whole process and delay the whole plant.
Yeah. What's the secret? What's the secret to ensuring that the supply chain goes off smoothly? Or what are the secrets? What are the key ingredients?
The first thing is good planning. Right. At the end of the day, what we do is we plan very accurately the procurement cycles. So we try to find out, when does construction need the part at the site? And then we calculate backwards, right? We calculate how much time do we need for the procurement process. So they need it in October. The lead time is 6 months, so we buy it in April, and so on and so on. So, and then when does engineering have to have the engineering specs ready that we are able to buy? So it's a backward process calculation, and then every bits and piece is scheduled. And the first part of the recipe is stay to your commitment, stay in time, and buy in time, and deliver in time.
Nothing actually survives the planning process because, things change.
And this is the daily business, right? This is the other part of the daily business, right? Usually you come to the office and you have an email saying, hey, we have a problem, right? And then the question is, how can we mitigate this? If you're really good in your supply chain organization, you are maybe able to detect these disturbances before they even happen, right? Let's say the issue we had with the Panama Canal, right? When shipments took 4 or 6 weeks longer because they have to go the longer route, which means you get your valve 6 weeks later. So how do you mitigate this, right? So you pull all the specialists together, you make a plan, you talk to your supplier, you talk to the shipping company and say, okay, let's land it in Los Angeles and don't go around the corner and ship it or do the last mile with a train, right? Or by truck, right? So this is kind of what we try to do, is, first of all, to mitigate all risk in advance. But if it happens, then really throw everything in there and say, okay, how can we mitigate this?
Yeah, triage, scramble, and try to solve the urgent problem that you have right in front of you.
Yes.
Like, was that Panama Canal story, was that a real incident?
Yeah, this was a real incident last year where shipments from Asia took 4 weeks longer. And not only that, it was also more expensive because the ships were burning more fuel. And of course, people are coming back to you and asking for more money.
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, I want to shift to some history. You've been in the EPC business for quite a while. I would love to hear you talk about how the role of an EPC company has changed over time.
I think there's a couple of aspects to this. When I started my career, this was in Europe. And we were competing with US companies, usually for our projects, mainly in the Middle East. This was kind of a fair competition. And then we got competition from Asia. So Korean companies or Chinese companies, which were more construction companies before, now came into the EPC business and were competing with us on a much lower cost rate. So we had to adjust and work on our cost strategy as well to stay competitive.
So globalization.
Yeah, globalization was one thing, right? And then over the 27 years, I think the role of the EPC became more to a partner to the client. Or when I started 27 years ago, the client sent an RFQ and you were just bidding what he wanted. Today, in particular in Kiewit, we really try to analyze what does the client really need? What is his aim? What he wants to achieve? What is his decision-making process? And then we try to, of course, bid according to what he's asking for, but also offer him opportunities he can look at to maybe get a better product at the end of the day than he was asking for.
Interesting. Like what would be an example of that where you're not just responding to the letter to what's being requested, but you're maybe changing their requirement based on an idea that you have.
So one thing could be that he's asking for a certain capacity, right? And says, hey, I want that much LNG and I want 4 different trains with 25% capacity each. And you make a feasibility study and go back and say, hey, client, if you build 2 trains, 50%, this would be much lower in investment cost.
Got it.
Gives you still flexibility to run different capacities, but you would save a lot of money, right? This is an easy example.
Good example, right? And you guys have that insight from having built LNG plants before.
Yeah, and we have a group of experts who are doing this more or less the same whole day and try to develop projects and help clients to exactly come to these kind of decisions.
Is there something that's changed in the culture of the industry that allows for that back and forth? Timelines of these projects that allows for that consultation to happen between the owner and the EPC when you're bidding it?
Yeah, it depends a little bit on the project. It depends a little bit on the client. If you have a very mature client who has done a lot of studies up front and knows that, I think then it's a different process than you have a developer who goes really through the different steps to develop such a project.
I see.
That's definitely a difference.
You spend a lot of time building these partnerships with companies that supply you with products. What are like the characteristics that define the best partners? What are those qualities that you've seen over your career?
I think there's a couple of boxes which a perfect partner would check, right? The first is they should be a very productive company. They should be very reliable, right? They should be financially stable. They should have a good reputation and references. What's very maybe most important is they should stick to their commitments, right? At the end of the day, our suppliers, our partners are a very important part of these projects. And we build on their commitments when they are providing the material. Yeah. And when they fail, this has and can have a huge impact on our projects.
Do you have any stories of vendors that have come through for you in difficult moments that sort of reflect markers of that greater partnership with you?
When problems occur, this is what we are actually looking for, right? I mean, we all know we live in a complex world, right? And it's not always the responsibility of the supplier if he's getting late and getting delayed, right? He has sub-suppliers as well. And there might be force majeure events who could delay things.
Right.
The important thing on my list, what I missed was the transparency. Right? What we are looking for is someone who comes to us and say, hey, I have a problem. We have a problem. And then we can sit together, all together, and try to solve the problem. The worst thing is they recognize they have a problem, try to solve it themselves for 4 or 6 weeks, and then come back and say, hey, we have a problem, but it's too late to make any changes.
Sure.
Right? So for us, it's very important that we get these kind of informations early, have a transparent supplier who says, hey, we have an issue. Let's come together and help me, right, to solve this.
Yeah. Deliver good news fast and bad news faster.
Yes.
Right?
Correct.
So that, everyone can collaborate around that.
I mean, we do our part to this because we have expediting. So we try to expedite the vendors and try to, it's not a control of the vendor, but it's really an active expediting and monitoring of their production engineering phases to identify early if there is a problem.
Yeah. And your team, expediting, sits within supply chain?
Yeah. It's a part of my organization. And they get in touch with vendors weekly, bi-weekly, depends on how critical the equipment is.
Yeah.
And then have status calls, really talk maybe to their sub-suppliers if it's a big item.
Oh, wow. You're leaving.
It goes very deep. And we do actual visits in the facilities as well to see with our own eyes where everything stands.
And you'll be embedded sometimes, like you'll have people full-time at a supplier's facility in some cases?
Yes. If it's a brand new supplier, a very critical equipment, or a market where, let's say a developing market, then we may decide to have a full-time inspector to supervise the vendor 24/7.
Obvious question to ask in this moment is about the changes that are happening right now on the global landscape, spurred by American trade policies, all the tariffs that are being introduced, the counter tariffs, the realignment that's happening. What is your perspective on that?
Not going too much into politics, of course, but
leaving
at the end of
politics.
the day, as a procurement person, you don't like tariffs, right? Because it makes your sourcing more expensive. Because at the end of the day, I pay the tariffs, or my company pays the tariffs, and then finally the client pays the tariffs.
Right.
I understand that tariffs and customs duties you have in every country, right? Every country is asking for this. But I think the most important thing is that we get kind of a security how to plan. For us, it's hard right now to plan and estimate our cost for our projects because we don't know what happens in 30 days from now. Maybe there's a change and then we have to re-estimate. It's not so difficult to estimate the direct tariff implications because if I import something from a third-party country, I can go into the list and see, hey, it's 20% if it's coming from the EU, for example. The problem is that the indirect effects you have because suppliers in the US raise their prices because the import of goods is more expensive, right? When we estimate our job, we don't really know where the heat exchanger supplier from the US is buying his plate from.
Right.
It could be a plate from the US without any tariffs, or it could be a plate coming from South Korea, which then is subject to 25% tariffs.
Sure.
Which he would claim we don't have this really in our estimate, right? And then how to prove this to the client is the next challenge because most of the EPCs and also the vendors have change of law clauses in their contracts. But how do you prove to a client that this is a change subject to the tariffs and not maybe because you changed your engineering?
How are you handling that in this moment? Your business has to keep going and you're continuing to put bids out there. Do you put a factor into your bids for this uncertainty, or is there some new clauses that you're putting into your contracts around that address this? No,
really, this is exactly what we try to avoid. We try to be as transparent with the client as possible and not to put too much contingency into our contract and rather convince the client it's better you take the risk because you have the risk anyway, instead of we having taken the risk and price something in which is not really transparent to you.
Do you actually break out the tariffs in your tariff cost and the duty cost?
Yes, the direct tariffs we do.
Okay.
The indirects is a little bit a problem because
Sure.
the client, the supplier doesn't tell us, hey, the casing of the compressor is $3.2 million and it's coming from Czechia and Germany.
Yeah.
So we don't have these details.
They're not breaking out the tariff cost to you in the bid to you.
Not to this detail.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you thought about asking suppliers to do that?
Yeah.
I noticed, for example, that Amazon is now, I read about it. I haven't seen it myself, but they're actually listing above the total price on an item, the tariff cost.
We try to be as transparent as possible, not to price anything in, and ask the vendor if he's providing it, but also the vendors, when they bid the compressor to us, they haven't done their engineering themselves yet.
Sure.
So they don't even know where they will buy the stuff because procurement will tell them, hey, I can buy it here in country A, B, or C. I don't know yet.
Absolutely. No, the uncertainty is really difficult.
Yeah. And this is really what our biggest problem is. So it would be good to know what will be the tariffs, and then we can work with this.
Right. Have it stabilize, and then
Yes.
you can move forward from there. Are there any best practices going back to the global sort of business culture question? Are there any practices from Europe that you think U.S. procurement should adopt, or vice versa?
No, I don't think so. Not in the EPC business. There might be some examples what you do in other businesses in procurement. There was a trend to do some e-auctions, reverse auctions. This never really made its way into the EPC business, I think, for engineered equipment. And even here, if people are not having enough discounts in their pricing, these auctions do not make any sense. So again, I think there's more cultural difference than practice because the procurement community is pretty close, and there's a lot of transparency about tools and how you do things, so that I think from a practice perspective, there's not huge differences.
Yeah, as in, the Europeans are using the same tools that the Americans are using, the same project planning software, the same piping design software, sort of EPC has settled on a common stack, a common tech stack.
Yeah.
This is a cyclical business. There's always some cycle that we're in the middle of. What's the cycle that we're in right now in OGC, let's say?
What I read is that we actually in the infrastructure green energy cycle. A lot fits into what Kiewit does. Let's start with the infrastructure. For Kiewit, definitely it's great. We are an infrastructure company. It's a big part of our business. There's a lot of investments and we have a lot of projects in the infrastructure business. So that was good for us. The green energy, I personally like this a lot because I think green energy and these green projects will make our world a little better. From an engineering perspective, there's a lot of new technologies. There's other technical challenges than we had before. And for me as an engineer, that's always interesting to deal with these kind of things and see something different, right? So I really like this green cycle. We had a lot of projects in this area as well. I read that the new super cycle might be the AI super cycle.
Yeah, that's right. I read that. I also, we were chatting beforehand. So tell me more about that. Like, do you see that like in the business? Do you see, there being infrastructure investments around AI?
Yeah. So we our industrial group is bidding on data center projects, but our power business, a lot of people forget that these data centers need a lot of energy, and our power business is very, very busy building power plants to support the data center.
Exactly. Like the power requirements are enormous for the data centers are super dense in terms of the power that they require.
And the reliability of the power.
Redundancy yes, exactly. You can't have these data centers shut down or not run continuously.
So this is kind of one of the strengths of Kiewit, I think, is the diversity of the company. So we are in certain businesses, and if one business is strong, then we focus on this. And if the other becomes strong, then we focus on the other. If we don't have a lot of work in OGC, we all work according to the same procedures and tool in supply chain. So I have people working on infrastructure jobs. I have people working on industrial projects. I've worked people in my organization working for power jobs.
You mentioned earlier that one of your jobs is in supply chain is resource management. Do you guys share resources or borrow resources as these cycles are up or down?
This is exactly what I mentioned. Is because we work to the same tools and procedures, it's easy for us to provide people to other organizations.
Right.
And with a new kind of remote work, and we all learned how to work with teams, they don't even have to sit physically in Kansas City to support a power job. They can do this from Houston, right? Which makes it much easier for people to jump on a different project without changing their whole life.
What is the learning edge for a procurement leader today? What are the new things that are on the horizon that you're diving into or going deeper on or exploring beyond the daily work? What are the new things that are being explored and put in place?
I think a big difference to the past is that in supply chain, you analyze more the risk structure of the award you are going to do. So to analyze where could be a risk, instead of, hey, we put a lot of liquidated damages on the vendor or penalties, let's try to understand what risk he has and then mitigate these risks together. To do this, you need a lot of information. How can you process all this information to make the right decision? And I think there's where AI comes into play, right? So AI, I think, will help us to digest all the information much better in a shorter time to make the right decisions. So I think this is an important tool we have to look into and see what opportunities it brings.
I heard you say a couple of things. One is understand the underlying risks that your suppliers face, and get involved, get to understand those risks, right? So that it's not a black box. It's getting inside the black box to understand the risks. Another is then accumulating the right data to help you assess the state of that risk. Is the risk high? Is the risk low? And then you're saying AI can be a tool to process all of this data. So how much of that do you do today?
There's projects we are looking into. Of course, there's not a lot I can talk about what we're all doing.
Sure.
But it goes into, of course, predictive analytics, right? So what could happen? What are indications that something is going wrong?
Yeah.
Talk to university recently. They have a project to do predictive expediting. So AI looks into data and says, hey, there's a red flag with this supplier for this equipment in this purchase order. There might be an issue, or might be a issue coming up in 2 months from now. So very interesting stuff.
One thing I'm curious about is the history of procurement within EPCs and the influence that they used to have versus influence they have today. Has that changed over time, and what does that look like today? The role that procurement has at the different stages of a project.
I think it has changed a lot. Supply chain was called procurement when I started, right? So procurement was more the organization which is buying, right? The procurement process was, hey, buy as cheap as you can. Not very often there was a total cost of ownership analysis, which tells you what is really the best solution for this application. This has changed, right? It's not supply chain. It's much broader, right? It brought logistics in there, quality surveillance, all this. So it really devolved from pure buying organization to a real managing supply chain organization.
And as such, I mean, you guys are a part of any project that an EPC would take on from the inception.
In all companies I worked for, luckily, procurement, supply chain always had a seat at the table right from the beginning.
Yeah.
So in Kiewit, when a new project starts, procurement, supply chain sits at the table, and we are part of the team, developing the right strategy, helping with the estimate, identifying the risk, doing our part of the estimate, then turn in the bid to the client.
Yeah. So supply chain has come a long way from when it was just procurement.
Yeah, you see I think a lot of companies recognized during COVID and after COVID how vulnerable their supply chains are, that they end up without products and empty shelves. I think this changed a lot. Maybe not in the EPC world. This started already earlier, but in other areas of supply chain. Today, I just heard from a study that most supply chain VPs or presidents today report directly to the CEO or CFO, or at least a very high level EVP. And in the past, this was sometimes they reported to an operational manager or something like that.
Yeah.
So this definitely has changed.
Yeah. So you joined Kiewit early in COVID?
Yeah, September 2020. In the middle of COVID.
In the middle of COVID. What was that like?
Horrible. It was horrible.
Say more. I'm really curious.
I'm a people person, right? I even today, I go to the office almost every day. I like to interact people. So you onboard a new company, you don't know anyone. Everybody's at home. You cannot interact. I think I was one of the first person back in the office. I was just waiting for getting back and meeting people and interact with people. I'm not a good worker from home.
Yeah.
To be honest, I like to talk to the people and to my people and talk about what we can do and what needs to be better and how can we improve and these kind of things. Right. You cannot do this over Teams.
How did you guys deal with that? When as long as you couldn't be in the office, were there some tricks that you developed to make, get the work done on Teams?
Yeah, I think it needed some time to develop the discipline to set up these meetings.
Yeah.
Because what I don't like is, when I see someone, I just go to him and talk to him, right? On Teams, his light is red and you think he's in a meeting or whatever, you cannot call him, right? So this spontaneous communication is what's missing.
Yeah.
Right. To develop this is, I think, quite hard. So it needs a lot of discipline to set up these calls and then talk to people about this. But this doesn't have the quality, I think, than talking in person, face to face.
I agree. Yeah. And that spontaneous hallway conversations and the collisions.
This floor engineering, we call it.
Floor engineering. Yeah. Management by walking around. Yeah, absolutely. What about the business of procurement? How did COVID change that? You had to scramble. Like you talked about the Panama Canal. This was like, probably you had a lot of those Panama Canal type incidents happening.
Yeah, one example was we did remote inspections because people could not travel, right? So we kind of asked the vendor to put up his phone and we did FaceTime inspections. It was interesting that this really... Everybody thought this is the future because it saves cost, but sure. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's almost done and not
used
or
anymore.
completely gone and not used anymore.
Yeah, there's so much that you see at the margins outside of the frame of Teams.
Yeah.
When you go on site, you see the product, but then you see everything happening around it, and that information, you can't get on Teams.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
You're an engineer.
Yes.
So you
mechanical engineer,
fellow mechanical engineer. How did that shape your work as in supply chain? That technical foundation.
Yeah, because in the EPC business, the procurement is very technical oriented, right? So you buy complex equipment. I think it helped me a lot. I always said it's easier to train an engineer in negotiating T's and C's than to train a business person on the technical stuff. I think there's something to it. I think it helps a lot in the EPC business if you have a good technical understanding of what you are buying, that you understand what you are buying. That makes you a better buyer.
How do you train your new hires and your team on this knowledge, whether they're engineers or not engineers? Do you even hire non-engineers as buyers?
Yeah.
All the time. Okay.
Most of my people have now, all the young people I hire have supply chain degrees, right? Something.
Right.
I mean, there's
Didn't
another
exist.
thing that didn't exist when
Right.
I went to college. There was no supply chain. I mean, I didn't even know what supply chain is,
Sure.
right? When I was in college. So today, there are people coming from school with a broad know-how of about supply chain.
Right.
And we have people who are not from the EPC business. We really start training them what means EPC, right? What are the different components? How is the workflow? And how does it all come together? From a technical perspective, we very often use the vendors. So we engage the people to go to the workshops, see with their own eyes what they are buying, go to exhibitions, go to conferences, see the products there, talk to the vendor, let them explain, or talk to the engineers, right? I always say, hey, the best source of know-how is your engineer who specifies what you are buying. He knows best. Talk to him, ask him, hey, what are the different components? What are the critical components? What are the most expensive components? This is what you need to analyze. What are you buying? What are you manufacturing yourself? The buyers have to be curious, right, to understand what are they buying. This makes them really a good buyer.
And do you guys have a culture in which engineers and buyers sort of collaborate well together? Sometimes these different personas, I mean, they have different ways of, different types of work. They have different ways of thinking. They prioritize different things. Sometimes those interfaces can be difficult.
When I took over the organization, I changed the organization to a category-oriented procurement organization, supply chain organizations. So I have categorized my buyers into certain groups. So there's a group of buyers who buys all the rotating equipment. Some buyers who buy all the piping or the fabrication. So they are becoming experts in this. But they also work with the same engineers over and over.
Got it.
So not only that they learn the products, they also build a relationship to the engineers and trust each other and trust them that they ask these kind of questions. Because at the end of the day, they don't want to embarrass themselves that they don't know maybe what this technical item is, right?
Sure.
But if you know someone, then you ask, hey, can you explain to me how this works?
That's how you create really good cross-functional teams.
And now
it's all about
after
trust.
3 years, and now after 3 years, we see kind of the benefit of this organization because we have very good relationships to the vendors, but also my supply chain specialists have very good relationships to the engineers, right? And this pays back now.
What advice do you have for young professionals that want to work in supply chain?
Yeah, if it's someone on college, then I would definitely recommend to do internships in supply chain in maybe different companies where you see different aspects of supply chain, maybe a seal manufacturer, a manufacturing company like piping technology, where you have different problems to solve in supply chain you have in an EPC, right? If you have seen these different organizations, then it's definitely beneficiary for a role in EPC supply chain. It's just be curious to understand what are you buying. I said this before. If you understand what you are buying and analyze what you're buying, it's much easier. And take your time. Take your time to learn and understand and try to understand the whole supply chain and not the small piece from sending out the requisition until you award the contract, right? Then when it really starts.
The actual fulfillment of the supply, approval drawings, right? The whole life cycle of the trade.
Paying invoices.
Being invoiced. Yeah, no, I get it. That's great. So gain experience.
Yeah.
That's, go.
And take time to learn, right? This time is so quick, right? So you order a pizza, 10 minutes later you have a pizza, right? You order something on Amazon, Uber. 2 minutes later you have it, or even the same day they deliver some of the stuff now. So kind of people think the career is the same, has the same speed, right? It does not. right? I think we want to set up people to be successful, right? And to be successful, you need a certain experience, right? So our projects are long running jobs, right? So some projects run for 5 years. So, and then you have done one job. If you are on this job for 5 years, I mean, nobody is on the job for 5 years, right? But I mean, you may be on this job for 1 or 2 years, and then you have just seen one job, right? And the next job is different. This is in our business what makes it very interesting, that no job is like the other. Every project has some different aspects. One is reimbursable, one is open book, one is lump sum, one is a very experienced client. The next client is maybe a professional who goes into any decision together with you. So every job is different, and I think it needs 2-3 jobs until you really understand all the aspects of EPC.
Do you think that the EPC business has a challenge in recruiting young people of this generation to work in it? Is it lower on some ladder of desirable opportunities to young people today?
To a certain extent, yes, because of course it's maybe more sexy to work for Tesla or Amazon or Microsoft or the kind of these companies.
Yeah.
Whereas this traditional industry like construction is maybe not the most attractive one. But so we work together with the University of Houston with the supply chain program of the Bauer College, and we do a lot of marketing there to let the students understand better what our business is about, right? It's not really, the supply chain is not so much construction or construction doesn't have this construction smell anymore, right? It's now a lot of high tech came into this.
Yeah.
Most of our builders have iPads, right? Where they see how the planning works. It's also construction has modernized and has attractive positions there for people who are technic savvy, right?
Yeah.
So the industry has changed a lot, and you just need to tell people that. And then Kiewit is a very attractive company. We have really great success in winning young people, talent to join us. So right now it works, but again, competition is strong.
Yeah, let's talk about technology. You mentioned that that's part of maybe the perceptual problem that construction is viewed as a older industry, but you mentioned that you guys use technology tools. Could you tell us more about what does that technology stack look like inside of Kiewit? What are the specific tools that are used in the life cycle of one of these projects? Procurement and non-procurement tools. What are the major components that show up in your daily work?
So yeah, it all starts in engineering with the planning, 3D, CAD design tools.
Yep.
The engineers are using, and all kinds of software to calculate piping and electrical and all these kind of things. Then it comes to procurement. So we have a procurement suite in Kiewit we work with. And then it all moves into construction, where construction gets all the data they need to do their planning, right? I mean, there's always an original planning, and then there's the planning of the actual work based on the new dates we get for material, the updated dates for material or engineering.
What are some of those tools? Like, for example, you have a procurement suite. Is that something you've built in-house? Is that something that is a third-party product that you've purchased?
We used Innate contracts and from a company Innate. Innate.
Okay.
This is a contract management tool we are using. A very strong tool to manage the contracts.
And that manages the whole procurement cycle from requirements to, getting bids to award and then supply.
This is our contract management tool, which manages the contract. For our material flow, I would say we have an in-house tool, which is called Material Visibility.
That you've built internally.
Yes.
Got it. Got it.
There are third-party tools we have used before, but finally we decided to develop our own tool.
Tell me, what was the most challenging project you've ever worked on, and what did you learn from it?
I think looking back, this was a project we executed with UDA. 2003 was a fertilizer project, ammonia project in Saudi Arabia for SAFCO. Till today, it's the biggest single ammonia train in the world, with about 3,700 tons ammonia every day produced. This was a very challenging project. We had some issues with the engineering and the estimate, so we made some mistakes there. Then when we went into construction, there were a lot of hidden issues in the ground. This was 2003 when there happened some terrorist attacks in Saudi Arabia. So when we traveled there was military in front of the hotel. So it was not an atmosphere where you can really work to your best performance. We finally finished the job, right? So we didn't walk away. So what I learned is stick to your commitments, right? You signed up for this job, even if it's hard and difficult, and you don't go through a lot of burden, bring it to an end, right? And then deliver what you promised to deliver. I think this is an important thing I learned. Even if it was scary sometimes.
You mentioned sticking to your commitments, and you mentioned that's one of the hallmarks of the best vendors. Tell me about a vendor experience that you've had that's like really delighted you, that's really stood out in your history.
Yeah, there was a vendor. It was a new vendor for us. He delivered some static equipment. It was in Asia. Was new to us, so we sent inspectors full time there to monitor their performance. And then a couple of months in, I visited the supplier, and the CEO came on the shop floor and came to me and say, "Hey, Mr. Bernstiel, I thank you so much that you sent these inspectors because they are training my people. They are telling us what good work looks like. They help my people to become better and become better workers." And for me, this was very impressive because very often vendors are telling, "Hey, stay away. Let us do our thing. I don't need your inspectors. I have my own quality control." And he was really the first man who told me, "Hey, your people helped me to become better." And this was very interesting because I never heard this before.
I love it. Something I believe and I say is like we should all be so lucky as to have people who ask a lot of us.
Yeah.
Because then when we do, we're asked to rise to the occasion.
At the end of the day, it's a team sport, right? Everybody has to bring his part and contribute to his extent. So I think it's not about one person or one party. It's about us.
I want to ask you about your relationship and your experience with piping technology. As you know, we're celebrating our 50-year anniversary. Do you have any anecdotes that stand out to you about working with us?
I think it was,
and obviously, I'm like fishing for compliments here.
I understand.
And tell me I'm handsome.
Yeah. No, Piping Tech was actually one of the first suppliers in the US I visited when I came, because my assistant at the time, Cindy, she was a big fan of Piping Tech, and you were always a big contributor of the golf tournament, and Randy was a guest in our office very often, and she introduced me to PTP, so I visited the shop. I met Durga, and we talked about UH. She introduced me to UH. There was a frequent meeting between Randy and me and other people, and PTP was always providing special solutions. I mean, you do the standard stuff as well, but whenever I came to the factory, Randy showed me, "Hey, we did this special solution for our client, for this client, and this special solution. We did this special solution. Your engineers came and we put this special solution together." So it was always enlightening the creativity and the commitment your people had, and how excited you got about these technical challenges.
Yeah.
I really liked it.
we went through a process recently of defining our mission, vision, and values. And one of the values that ties back to what you said is that we run towards hard problems. When there's like a unusual or difficult problem, that's when we pay the most attention and we get excited as a company. And this is deeply wired inside of us. We just recently made a 5-ply expansion joint, 5 layers, separate cylinders that were then nested inside of each other, resistance welded, and then we punch formed the bellows. And we've never done it before, but we said we tested and we thought we could do it, but we love solving hard problems. So absolutely accurate to our culture as a company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's definitely what I would sign for.
Yeah. Hey, thank you a lot. Thanks so much, Carsten, for joining us today. And this was a lot of fun. Look forward to more chats.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.